Imagine picking up an ordinary-looking 10-pence coin from an old box, a drawer, a collection, or even a pile of loose change. At first, you see nothing special. You see the familiar portrait of Queen Elizabeth II on one side, a crowned lion on the other, and the number 10 at the bottom. It looks like a coin that should be worth exactly what it says, 10 pence. But there is something about this particular coin that makes it much more interesting than a normal piece of pocket change. Look closely at the date, 1992. That single year marks an important change in the history of the British 10p coin. It was the year Britain moved from the old large 10p to a much smaller version. And here is where things become interesting. Not every 1992 10-pence coin is exactly the same. Some were made for circulation. Some were produced for collectors. There were different sizes, different production types, and differences that can completely change the interest and potential value of a coin. So before you throw an old 10p into a jar, spend it at a shop, or assume it is worthless because it only says 10 pence, take a closer look. Because sometimes the real story of a coin is not written in big letters. Sometimes it is hidden in the date, the size, the design, the condition, and the tiny details that most people never notice. And today we are going to take a very close look at this 1992 British 10-pence coin. Discover why this year is important. Understand the two different 1992 versions. Look at the design and history. Discuss what collectors actually look for. And finally answer the big question, the coin in front of us. The coin we are looking at today is a British 10-pence piece featuring Queen Elizabeth II on the obverse and a crowned lion on the reverse. At first glance, it looks like a very ordinary British coin. The obverse shows the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II wearing a crown. Around the portrait is the traditional inscription beginning with Elizabeth II, followed by the Latin abbreviations used on British coinage. On the reverse, we see a crowned lion standing proudly, with the words 10 pence around the design and the number 10 below. This lion design is one of the most recognizable designs ever used on the British 10p. The reverse design was created by Christopher Ironside, and the lion was used on the 10p for many years. The design appeared from the late 1960s through 2008, making it part of a very long chapter in British decimal coin history, Royal Mint Museum. But the most important detail for this particular coin is not the lion. It is the date. And that date takes us to an important moment in British coinage, why 1992 matters. The British 10p had existed in a much larger form since 1968. When decimal coinage was introduced, the 10p was intentionally made similar in size to the old florin, or 2-shilling coin. The original 10p was large, heavy, and made from cupro-nickel. For many years, people became completely familiar with that large silver-colored coin, but eventually the Royal Mint introduced a smaller and lighter 10p. The smaller 10p was introduced on September 30th, 1992. This was a major change. The new smaller coin had a diameter of about 24.5 millimeters and weighed about 6.5 grams. The older, large 10p was about 28.5 millimeters and weighed around 11.31 grams. That is a noticeable difference when you hold both coins in your hand. Royal Mint Museum. So 1992 became a transitional year. And whenever a coin series goes through a major change, collectors naturally become interested. That does not automatically mean every coin from that year is rare or valuable. This is very important. A coin can be historically interesting without being extremely valuable. And that is exactly the situation we need to understand with the 1992. The big 1992 secret. Here is one of the most interesting things about the 1992 10p. There were actually two different size versions dated 1992. There was the older, larger 10p, and there was the new, smaller 10p. The large 1992 version was produced for royal mint sets rather than normal circulation, while the smaller 1992 version was produced in huge numbers for circulation, coin hunter. This means that simply finding the date 1992 is not enough. You need to know which 1992 coin you have. This is one of the biggest mistakes beginners make when looking at old coins. They see a date that appears on a list of interesting coins and immediately assume their coin must be rare. But coin collecting does not work that way. The date is only the beginning. You need to check the type. You need to check the size. You need to check the condition. You need to check whether the coin was made for circulation or as part of a collector's set. And if you believe you have something unusual, you need to look for genuine varieties or errors. the small 1992 10p, the smaller 1992 10p is the version most people are likely to encounter. According to published mintage information, more than 1.4 billion small 1992 10p coins were produced. That is an enormous number, and when millions or billions of coins are made, the basic circulated example usually does not become extremely valuable simply because it is old. This is where the reality of coin collecting is very different from some of the exaggerated claims you may see online. You might see a headline saying that a 10p coin is worth hundreds, thousands, or even millions, but a headline is not proof of value. The real market value of a coin depends on what the exact coin is, its condition, rarity, variety, demand, and whether there is actual evidence of collectors paying a premium for that specific example. For the common circulated 1992 small 10p, the value is generally around face value unless there is something special about the coin. Numista's current indicative data also shows very modest values for circulated examples, with higher amounts possible for better grades and certain varieties. Numista. So if you have a normal circulated 1992 small 10p, do not expect it to suddenly pay your mortgage, but that does not make it boring. Far from it. The large 1992 10p. Now we come to the version that can be much more interesting to collectors. The large 1992 10p was not made for ordinary circulation in the same way as the smaller version. It was produced in Royal Mint sets. That makes it a different collectible. The large version measures approximately 28.5 millimeters and weighs around 1131 grams. It is also made from cupro nickel. The design is very similar, but its physical size is the key. This is why checking the diameter can be extremely useful if you're trying to identify a 1992 10p. The large version is not necessarily a fortune either. But because it is a set issue and is less commonly encountered in normal circulation, collectors can have more interest in it, especially when the coin is in excellent condition. Some published price guides list higher values for high-grade examples of the large 1992 type, but these are guide prices rather than guarantees of what every coin will sell for. Coinsandic.com. And that distinction is extremely important. A guide price is not the same thing as a confirmed sale price, looking at the Queen's portrait. Now let's turn our attention to the obverse. The portrait on this coin is not just a random image of Queen Elizabeth II. It belongs to a particular era of British coin design. The 1992 coin uses the portrait created by sculptor Raphael Makhlouf. This portrait was used on British circulating coins during the 1980s and 1990s. When you look closely, you can see the Queen facing to the right. She wears a crown, and the portrait has a formal appearance typical of British coinage from that period. The details may look simple from a distance, but coin collectors know that the condition of these details can tell you a lot about the coin. Look at the hair. Look at the crown. Look at the facial features. Look at the lettering around the edge. Look at the rim. If these details are sharp and strong, the coin may have experienced less wear. If the details are smooth and weak, the coin has probably circulated heavily. And condition is one of the most important factors in determining collectability. The reverse design. Now flip the coin over. This is where the famous crowned lion appears. The lion is standing in a proud position, with its body stretched across the center of the coin. Above and around the design is the wording 10 pence, and below the lion is the number 10. This design was created by Christopher Ironside. It became one of the defining designs of Britain's decimal 10p. The lion is not there simply because it looks impressive. The lion has deep historical associations with British heraldry and monarchy. British coins have used lions and other royal symbols for centuries. So when you hold this 1992 coin, you are not just holding 10 pence. You are holding a small piece of a much larger tradition of British coin design. Why the condition matters. Now let's talk about something that can make a huge difference in collecting: condition. Two coins can have exactly the same date. They can have exactly the same design. They can be made from exactly the same metal. But one can be worth considerably more to a collector, simply because it is in much better condition. Imagine two 1992 10p coins. The first one has been sitting in circulation for decades. It has scratches. The high points of the portrait are worn. The lion has lost some of its sharp detail. The lettering is still readable, but it is no longer crisp. Now imagine another 1992 10p that has been stored carefully since the day it was made. The surface is bright, The portrait is sharp. The lion's mane is clearly defined. The rim is clean. The lettering is strong. There are very few marks. Collectors will usually be much more interested in the second coin. This is why you should never clean an old coin simply because you think it looks dirty. Cleaning can damage the original surface and reduce collector appeal. A coin with natural age and original surfaces can be more desirable than a coin that has been aggressively polished. Don't make this mistake. If you find an old 10p, one of the worst things you can do is take a chemical cleaner and start scrubbing it. You might think you are making the coin look better, but you could actually be removing the natural surface. Collectors can often recognize cleaned coins, and once the original surface has been damaged, you cannot simply put it back. So if you think you have found something interesting, handle the coin carefully. Hold it by the edges. Avoid touching both faces unnecessarily. Keep it somewhere dry and safe. And if you are seriously interested in its value, consider having it examined by a reputable coin expert. How rare is the 1992 10p? Now we reach the question everyone wants answered. Is the 1992 10p rare? The honest answer is, it depends on which version you have. The small circulating 1992 10p was produced in very large numbers. Published figures put the mintage at more than 1.4 billion. That means the normal small, circulated version is not considered an extremely rare coin simply because it has a 1992 date. Coin hunter. However, the large 1992 version is much more interesting because it was produced as a set issue. That is why collectors need to identify the exact type before making any conclusion. This is also why a coin that looks ordinary can still be worth researching. The interesting part is not always the value. Sometimes the story behind the coin is the real treasure. The transition from large to small. Think about what was happening in Britain in 1992. For decades, people had been using the large 10p. Then suddenly there was a smaller version. Imagine going into a shop and receiving a coin that looked familiar, but felt different in your hand. The new coin was lighter. It was smaller. And yet it still represented the same denomination. This kind of change is fascinating, because coins are objects people use every day without thinking about them. A coin can pass through thousands of hands. It can sit in a cash register. It can travel from a supermarket to a pocket. It can fall behind furniture. It can be placed in a child's collection. It can remain in an old purse for decades, and then one day someone finds it and asks, "What is this?" That is where the journey of a coin collector often begins. What makes a coin valuable? There is a simple rule you should remember. Old does not automatically mean rare. Rare does not automatically mean expensive. And expensive does not automatically mean genuine. A coin becomes more interesting when several factors come together. It might have a low mintage. It might be a special proof or set issue. It might have a recognized variety. It might contain a genuine mint error. It might be in exceptionally high condition. Or there might simply be strong collector demand. The strongest coins usually have a combination of these factors. That is why you should never judge a coin only by its age. A coin from the 1990s can sometimes be more desirable than a coin that is much older if the newer coin has a rare variety or unusual production history. What about errors? Now let's talk about mint errors. This is where things can become especially exciting. A genuine mint error happens during the manufacturing process. It is not the same thing as a scratch made after the coin left the mint. It is not the same thing as damage caused by someone dropping the coin. And it is not the same thing as someone deliberately altering the coin. A genuine mint error can sometimes make a normal coin much more interesting to collectors. But there is a warning here. The internet is full of supposed errors that are actually normal production marks. Damage, wear, or imagination. For example, a small mark on the portrait does not automatically mean the coin is a rare error. A strange-looking edge does not automatically mean a mint mistake. A weak letter does not automatically mean a valuable variety. This is why authentication matters. If you believe your coin has an unusual error, take clear photographs and compare it with known examples. Do not assume that every unusual mark is worth money. The importance of the size. For this particular 1992 coin, one of the first things I would check is the size. Remember the two versions. The older large version is around 28.5 millimeters. The new small version is around 24.5 millimeters. That difference is large enough to be measured easily with a proper ruler or, even better, digital calipers. The weight can also help. The large version is around 11.31 grams. The smaller version is around 6.5 grams. So if you find a 1992 10p and want to identify it properly, don't just look at the date. Measure it, weigh it, compare the design, and check the condition. Those simple steps can tell you much more than a random online headline. What is the coin in this video worth? Now let's talk about the coin shown in this video. From the photographs, we can identify it as a British 10 pence with the Elizabeth II portrait and the crowned lion reverse, and the date appears to be 1992. However, photographs alone are not enough to give an exact market value. Why? Because we need to know the exact size and condition. If this is the common small circulating version, and it shows normal circulation wear, it is generally not a high-value rarity. Published references show ordinary circulated 1992, small 10p examples at around face value levels, while better quality examples can bring somewhat more depending on grade and variety. Numista. If, however, your coin turns out to be the large 1992 set version, that is a different story. Collectors may pay more for a well-preserved example. Some published guides show values of several pounds for uncirculated examples and higher guide figures for particularly strong grades, but these figures should never be treated as a guaranteed selling price. Coinsandic.com. So the most important thing is identification first. Value comes second. Why online coin values can be confusing. You may have seen videos or websites claiming that certain British coins are worth hundreds or thousands of pounds. Sometimes those claims are based on real rare coins, but sometimes they confuse asking prices with actual selling prices. There is a huge difference. Anyone can put a coin online for $10,000. That does not mean someone will actually pay $10,000 for it. Real value is better judged by actual completed sales, reputable catalogs, recognized varieties, and professional opinions. This is especially important for modern British decimal coins. Many were produced in very large numbers. So if someone tells you that every 1992 10p is worth hundreds of pounds, be extremely careful. That is not how the market works. A coin's story can be more valuable than its price. Here is something I think many people forget. Coin collecting is not only about money. Imagine this coin was originally placed into someone's pocket in 1992. At that time, Queen Elizabeth II was still on the throne. The country was using the old large 10p and the new, smaller 10p as part of a changing coin system. Someone may have received this coin as change. They may have placed it in a purse. Maybe a child picked it up. Maybe it went into a savings jar. Maybe it disappeared into a drawer. And decades later, it ended up in the hands of a collector. That journey is impossible to know. But the coin itself survived it. That is what makes old coins fascinating. They are tiny objects, but they can carry decades of history. What should you do if you find one? If you find a 1992 10p, don't immediately sell it. First, identify it. Look at the date. Check the size. Check the weight. Look at the portrait. Look at the lion. Inspect the edge. Check whether it has unusual features. Then compare the coin with trusted references. If the coin looks ordinary and heavily circulated, you probably don't have a major rarity. But if the coin appears to be a large 1992 version, a special set issue, an unusual variety, or a genuine mint error, then it may deserve closer attention. And if the coin appears to be in exceptional condition, protect it. Do not clean it. Do not polish it. Do not scratch the surface trying to reveal details. Keep it safely stored. The final verdict. So after everything we have discussed, what is the final verdict on the 1992 British 10 pence? The answer is more interesting than simply saying 10 pence or hundreds of pounds. The normal small 1992 10p was produced in enormous numbers, so a typical circulated example is not automatically rare. But 1992 is still an important date because it marks the introduction of the smaller 10p coin. There was also a large 1992 version produced for Royal Mint sets, and that version is a separate collectible variety. That means your first job is not to ask, how much is my coin worth? Your first question should be, which 1992 10p do I actually have? That one question can completely change the conversation. Final message for viewers. So the next time you see an old 10p coin sitting in a drawer, don't be too quick to ignore it. Turn it over. Look at the date. Look at the portrait. Look at the lion. Look at the condition. And most importantly, learn what you are actually holding. Because coin collecting is not about believing every dramatic value claim you see online. It is about learning how to identify coins. It is about understanding history. It is about recognizing varieties. And sometimes, it is about finding something that millions of other people simply overlooked. The 1992 British 10p is a perfect example. At first, it looks like an ordinary 10-pence coin. But behind that simple appearance is an important change in British coinage, the transition from the large 10p to the smaller 10p. The Royal Mint introduced the smaller version on September 30th, 1992, and the two versions make this year particularly interesting for collectors. Royal Mint Museum. And that is the lesson I want you to remember. Never judge a coin only by its face value, but at the same time, never believe a huge value claim without checking the facts. The smartest collectors do both. They stay curious. They check the details. They compare varieties. They protect their coins. And they understand that rarity and value are two different things. So take another look at the 1992 10p in your collection. Measure it. Check its condition. Look carefully at both sides. And if you discover that you have an unusual version, don't rush to spend it. You may have found something worth investigating. Maybe it will not make you rich. Maybe it will only be worth a small premium. Or maybe you have discovered a special version that deserves a place in a serious collection. But whatever the final value turns out to be, there is one thing this little coin has already done. It has taken us back to a fascinating moment in British history. A moment when an old familiar coin was becoming smaller, lighter, and more modern. And that is why the 1992 10p deserves a second look. If you enjoyed this coin story, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because there are thousands of ordinary-looking coins out there, and some of them have stories that most people never take the time to discover.